when you start to understand a bit the principles, you get more free, and in that sense, it's very easy to adapt yourself to another form. I mean, yes, you are very plastic. You can easily.
That's right.
If it's a problem that for you to change your form, maybe it means that something is not it's not clear yet.
Patrick and I often do these calls before, usually a few months before we teach a seminar together, and this has been set up as a kind of a preview or a warm up for the Riviera Seminar that's coming in May, which Patrick will say something about a little bit later. The theme for our call today is unity and diversity in Aikido, exploring universal principles through the diversity of forms, and Patrick is going to introduce that.
The beginning of this kind of collaboration had occurred sometime last year. I was reading a particular excerpt that Bruno had written concerning his perspective around wanting to reach out to other teachers beyond stylistic differences and to connect with other practitioners at the level of principles, at the principles of the art. And I reached out to him and through social media and said, "Hey, would you like to have a moment to chat over a cup of coffee, long distance?" And we organized a call together, and we found a lot of common ground. And after having such a kind of inspiring moment of conversation with Bruno, I suggested that he join Miles and I for our yearly Riviera Seminar. And in the past, Miles and I have collaborated with Nado Shihan and Jan Nevelius and Dayu Takeda, and it seemed to be like a perfect fit to reach out and include Bruno in this conversation. And so we discussed what's the territory we'd like to look at, and we wanted to look at this kind of universal ground or the inherent principles in the art that bring us together in the practice of Aikido. And so we discussed, we went back and forth, and we came up with the theme, unity in diversity, finding that unifying principle, so those unifying principles that connect us in the various different approaches that we have in the world of Aikido. And as you well know, in the world of Aikido, our community is diverse. It has so many different aspects and so many different lines and lineages and stylistic differences and perspectives that can sometimes be problematic in being able to cross-train between different communities, different teachers, different groups. And so this was an approach or an attempt to approach this question of connecting beyond stylistic differences and beyond particular lineages, and to bring together an exploration at the level of something universal or something that unifies us. And that's how we came up with the theme, unity in diversity. Bruno?
Yes. So for me, it was a part of my practice to. It is the main part of my practice to define principles, because okay, we speak about different style, different teacher, school, everything, but you have also to give sense to your own practice first of all, and for that you need to discover what we call principles. So it's a very concrete things to work on in your daily practice. And when you start to touch these kind of principles, then you are more free to communicate with others, because they have also the same principles. As you know, I'm traveling a lot, so I thought that the best way to communicate is to focus on what is in common between the styles and the teaching, everything. And but first of all, you have to do it for yourself first in your daily practice. So in this seminar that we will do, I will share some concrete aspect, pedagogic aspect to focus on these principles in order to give sense to the practice and to see the other like yourself, no, not like something different or who make you insecure in your identity, but more like a mirror. You know, you see yourself in other situations.
Miles, you want to take it from there?
Yes, sure. Yeah, actually, I got a few things to say, but I just want to kind of touch on what Bruno said about, you know, traveling around and meeting different people in different cultures and different styles, different countries that really, you know, Aikido is kind of all over the world, and so there's a diverse, almost like an endless level of diversity in terms of cultures. And I've also traveled around quite a bit through Asia and through the Near East and the Far East and Europe and the States. And it's always touched me how Aikido has kind of had this unifying effect. But what really makes it special is when we can meet people at the level of principles, it has a unifying effect. You know, I always say that principle techniques divide, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but techniques create distinction. You know, there's this style and there's that style, and there's kind of a division there or a separation there. Techniques divide and principles unite. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with technical differences. In fact, you know, that variety is really, like I said, the spice of life. But I did notice that often when I was traveling around, if I taught a particular technical style, which I also have and I also teach, there were people that liked it, or there were people that kind of aligned with it or resonated with it, and there were people who didn't. And then, fine, this is how it is. Everybody has their preferences. But I would leave the seminar, I would leave the group kind of feeling like, well, you know, not quite satisfied. Whereas when I would always bring a principles-based approach, it doesn't matter who they are, what's their background, what is their style preference, how long they've been doing it, whether they're beginners or advanced. When everybody begins to organize around the principles, it creates this kind of creates a cohesion, a field of cohesion or congruency in what everybody's doing. And it's not that there's a congruency in what they're doing, but the approach kind of has an orientation, even though it's kind of unfolding spontaneously. And then everybody has a common orientation towards how is this practice of the principles going to unfold. And you know, this effect that I found in seminars is something that was always striking to me. And it's not like that at the beginning. You know, in a way, you can't really start at I mean, beginners can sometimes tap into the principles better than advanced people, simply because the advanced people have kind of a style in them already, and maybe they're a little bit, what do you say, their Aikido is good inside of that style, but moving a little bit out of that style might not be easy for a period. But in that sense, beginners sometimes can connect with the principles better, but they just can't express Aikido as well because they don't have that maturity yet. But the way that our development goes in working with the principles is usually from the outside in. So either you have techniques, or you have forms, or you have a style. And at least tradition, I still think there's a lot of validity to this. Validity to this is very important. That as a beginner, we conform to some style, some school. You know, it's like if you're going to dig a hole in the ground and you want to reach the source of water, it's good to stay in one place long enough until you reach the source, which is the principle. If you're jumping around different styles, that can be good and interesting. It could be good cross-training, but you're not necessarily tapping the principles. And then after a certain amount of time, usually a few years, let's say from up to Shodan, Nidan, Sandan, the principles that we're learning how to access, we're learning how to integrate, we're learning how to express, start to become internalized. And when the technique or the principle becomes internalized, the expression of your technique naturally begins to change. Your style might change, it might not change, but the way you express the technique is going to be different because it's expressing it from the inside out, principles-based approach, rather than from the outside in. And I guess the main thing for me is that the difference between that, and again, this is really a developmental thing. The difference between that and how it feels is night and day. And when you're training with somebody who's aligning with the principles, it's much easier for us to align with principles. Or when we are aligning with the principles, it's much easier for the people that we're practicing with to align with the principles. Then not only do we have a principles-based approach, but then we start to kind of have this principles-based community or dojo. And it doesn't matter what style you're doing. And from that point, then it's so easy to connect with other people who are organizing around principles because we are literally doing the same thing, even though the expression of Aikido might be different.
I think, both what Bruno said and what Miles said, I agree with and very much in accordance with. And I think there was a word there that Bruno, you used is that the exploration of principles has to be concrete, meaning that we give it a very, for me, working on principles is introducing something very tangible that every individual can come into access with and can taste and be able to identify within their own experience. I think there's Osensei said that Aikido exists in the manifest, the hidden, and the divine realms. And for me, the manifest is that realm that Miles was referring to as technique, the parts of those things that you can see, you can repeat, you can diagram. The hidden are those things inside the techniques which function as forms of essential nutrients or essential energies that make the technique, make the expression into Aikido. And then the divine for me is the perspectives, the inspiration that leads a person to be practicing Aikido in the first place. So if we were to use let's say a dialogue, a conversation as a model in this, the conversation, the manifest would be the words, the grammar, the syntax, what is being said. It's what can be recorded. It's what can be repeated. The principle, the hidden, would be that domain such as listening, the quality of listening in a conversation, which is very tangible, which is something that you can recognize and something you can work on, but it's not a thing that is you can't record it. You don't see it, and yet it's very viable. It's something essential, and for a conversation to function. And the perspective would be the reason why you're having the conversation. Is it business? Is it romantic? Is it teacher-student? Is it engaged as a level of friendship? It's the fundamental ground that the conversation stands on. So I think what I'm looking forward to is uncovering these principles in collaboration, both with Miles and with Bruno, in determining what are those things which are those hidden but essential components in our practice of Aikido, which function through the techniques, function through the expression of how we relate to relate to our partner, and which are very viable, which are very tangible, which are very concrete, but they aren't necessarily something that they're not like a technique in the sense that you can diagram it out or you can repeat it. There's something that has to be discovered by each individual directly. It has to be tasted by each individual directly, and that's where it becomes, as Miles was pointing out, a unifying experience. Because once everybody tastes it, then you start to recognize, okay, this is what listening is all about. This is what connection is all about, and that's a great realm and a tremendously unifying realm to practice together. Because regardless of the techniques or the stylistic techniques that you may be practicing, the sense of those principles that exist in those techniques. When we connect with them, they bring us together in the recognition of what Aikido is truly about. And so, for me, this is a very inspiring place to look at and to explore and to collaborate on. And collaboration, I think, is really essential when exploring the realm of principles, because we can really see how each teacher, each perspective of each teacher, as well as all the perspectives of the participants, have an impact on uncovering what those principles are and how they function in the relationship of Aikido.
Yeah, I like the word listening, because yes, I think one of the perspective of the practice is to become more sensitive, more sensible, to get more information, to feel more. And more you become sensitive, more you can see the things. And if you see the things, okay, you can start to see the beauty of the things, So yeah.
Right. And I think this is where Aikido differs a lot of times with other particular approaches in the martial art realm, in the sense that listening means that I bring the walls down. I open myself up to receiving that information so that I can respond in a more appropriate and intelligent way. And that can be contrary to my reactive system of fight, flight, or freeze, where I want to build the walls up or separate from that which feels threatening, where Aikido, at least with regards to the quality of listening, brings me closer to that which is with whom I'm training, brings me into a greater sense of intimacy or connection with who I'm training with, so that I understand and am able to receive that information and respond intelligently. So yeah, I think that's where I get very inspired with that whole leaning forward into the relationship. That makes sense?
Yeah. So if I can jump in.
Yeah.
So what occurred to me as Bruno was talking was, not only do we come through our practice and through experience, and as our practice matures, we open up to, we come into contact with the inner principles of the art, and we learn how to kind of manifest those and express those in many ways. But not only do we come into contact with the principles of Aikido, but we also come into contact with the principles of conflict, that, we become more sensitive to what is conflict, not in its 10,000 different manifestations, but at its core, the basic dissonance. And when we feel that there's that, wherever we feel that basic dissonance is actually that's the place for Aiki. That's the place that the art wants to be. Because if you don't have that dissonance, there's no need for Aikido. And that dissonance, when we align with it properly and centered, grounded, open, allowing the dissonance, connecting. And in this case, I'm talking, let's say, through our model of conflict with when we're training, grounded, centered, connected with the other, feeling the dissonance. And then when that starts to shift into resonance, we just feel that it's just such a better place to be. And then it can even take one more step into, from dissonance into resonance, which is good, but it can go further into coherence, where we actually start to kind of bond together as one. And then the art's just happening through us. It's just happening naturally through us. And not only is that the case in training together, not only is that the case individually, not only is that the case in training together, but it's also the case in co-teaching. As we start to kind of step into this space together, we're going to start to align, and there's going to be some sameness where we feel good. There's going to be some differences that we're trying to negotiate, finding the resonance, and hopefully, I say hopefully because there's nothing we can do to make coherence happen. But my experience is that when you're open to it emerging, it tends to emerge.
I like the word dissonance, but that kind of creative, that friction that occurs in the relationship between uke and nage, that's the place
Normal
where the creativity, or in all life, right, where creativity has that capacity to grow, that creative friction that can bring about the expression of something new. and this is what we're attempting to make ourselves available for in this collaboration, but also on the mat between Uke and Nage.
And you know what's interesting about it is that when somebody's expressing it, it can, I guess, you know, it goes back to what Bruno was saying, listening and being sensitive. But when somebody's there, they're aligned with this, let's say, and they're expressing principles, universal principles. It's tangible. You can see it. I was talking to a friend today from Florida, Don, and he Bruno, he said he was watching one of your videos, and he said I got hooked on watching Bruno's videos, and I know the feeling. It's like it's so, you know, it's so pretty to watch your Aikido, and it's not that we're just watching something pretty. It's like I connect. Same thing with Patrick, by the way, but you know, I know Patrick for 35 years. First time we're meeting. So it's just, you know, you're drawn in not to just the impressiveness of the expression of Aikido, but you're drawn into something universal there that it's also inside of me. And as that starts to manifest, even in a video recording of whenever, as it's being expressed and manifested in us, it also begins to be expressed and manifest in other people. And that's what's beautiful about it. That's what I mean by resonance.
Bruno, do you find it challenging to explore this approach of looking at principles with people who've never worked with you? How do you approach this when you're maybe meeting a group for the first time and they've never experienced your take on Aikido?
You know, sometimes when I go to a new country for teaching, I met people from completely another style, completely, and so yes, I just start with concrete pedagogic
Right.
scenario, and little by little, they, of course, they maybe the form that I propose is new, so you need time to digest a little bit the form, but the principles are so evident, obvious, that it's quite easy to be understandable.
For myself, I think there's can be sometimes a challenge in terms of people, as Miles said, being attached to the form that they practiced for so long, that letting go of that form to be able to access the principle can feel like a little bit of a challenging moment, because within the form there's a very clear understanding of what they know and what they don't know. But when you go into the realm of principles, there's a kind of a recognition that and in order for me to access the principles, I have to be fundamentally fully present in this moment here and now. I can't be distracted, and so it really demands a certain level of presence and being fully there, that I think form training doesn't require to the same degree. And so I think that in bringing people to the level of principle, it can be challenging if a person has never been confronted in that way, to be fundamentally fully present in what they're doing, in sync, literally in sync with Uke, and feeling that relationship in that moment by moment unfolding experience as we practice.
Our training is at least half, I would even say more of it is really just awareness training, simple awareness training. Of course, all through all the kind of manifestations of the body, the manifestations of the relationship, and how to apply the art, of course. But it's, you know, fundamentally it's awareness training, and that is demanding, not on a physical level, but on a mental level.
When you start to understand a bit the principles, you get more free, and in that sense, it's very easy to adapt yourself to another form. I mean, you are not stuck in your form. I mean, if you understand the principle, yes, you are very plastic. You know, you can easily.
That's right.
Things is not a problem. If it's a problem that for you to change your form, maybe it means that something is not clear yet.
Yeah, and that's for me, that's kind of an expression of mastery. If if we use that word, which is already a bit of maybe a loaded word, a lot of baggage with it. But for me, mastery means that you're actually liberated in the forms, but also liberated outside of the forms.
That, and if we go back into what that famous phrase out of Iwama, that what is referred to as takemusu, I think this is what that traditional word is actually referring to, that spontaneous capacity to be appropriate in our response to the differing attacks, because uke is always different, even though we practice fundamentally regular types of strikes and grabs. Each uke is unique in the way they function. There's also something universal about every uke, but there's also something very unique. And for me, Miles, you mentioned it's an awareness training, but I think it goes. It's not just only awareness in terms of our mind, but I think there's certain kind of capacity or willingness to see the moment, see uke in that moment, that is required, a willingness to see who we're facing, what we're facing. And there's a willingness that needs to be there in order to kind of accept what's occurring a little bit more on an emotional level, and a willingness to feel what's occurring at the physical realm, in the very tangible level of who we are, and how we make ourselves available in all these three domains, cognitive, emotional, and physical, corporeal or somatic, has a tremendous impact on how well we're able to receive the information coming in and respond in a way that feels that we're in sync with the moment, we're appropriate to the moment, or we're in not separate from the moment, if we're going to refer to kind of a spiritual perspective of actually feeling or experiencing a sense of unity with the moment. And I think this is what O-sensei was referring to in his teachings, but to be able to facilitate that, even just for a glimpse, this for me is very inspiring.
Yeah, part of our intention is not just to get together and warm up as teachers, but also to let the community kind of warm up. It's just a simple discussion. What is alive for you from this conversation? Let everybody have a chance to kind of express what's coming up for them, and then we're going to come back and do a Q&A. Okay. Hey, Cliff, welcome to the call.
Yeah, hi, Miles. I'll just start out with just saying I really love the kind of the grounding of the concepts in dialogue, in a discussion with someone. When we're having kind of a superficial discussion, it's at that level. When a discussion goes deeper, where we're talking about something that's inside of us, that's maybe concerning us, you have a deeper level discussion. So there's a quality of discussion. There's the listening, and then knowing when to respond, listening, responding. And so I like that, that kind of metaphor, that understanding of Aikido. And maybe this is part of it, but what I didn't hear is what each of you actually think the principles are of Aikido. I mean, I heard words like listening. Is that one of the principles of Aikido?
Nice,
based on
nice. Great, thanks, Cliff.
Yeah.
For example, we have very concrete principles like physical principle, biomechanic principles, geometric principles like axes, cycles, movement, all this aspect of principles that you can find in nature, for example, are something important to see in our practice. So it could be also, it's not just principles like non-opposition, like economy, like acceptation or things like that, but it's also very concrete physical yes, principles, almost scientific principles.
Well, there's individual principles. Well, okay, first I should say that for me, principles are universal. So that means that they are accessible and expressible and alignable all times, all places, through all circumstances. Always was, always is, always will be. And if it's not, then it's probably not a universal principle. You know, it might just be something that's particular but not universal. And to like for me, concrete, you know, day one is centering and grounding, because the conflict energy of Aikido, you know, the reason we come to Aikido is, you know, there's some martial conflict there, takes us up and out. So centering and grounding is something that we can do at all times in all places, through all circumstances. Even if you're in an airplane, you can ground somehow. Relational principles, of course, we spoke about listening. It's obvious when there's no listening. Connection is really kind of the primary principle there. Alignment. Oh yeah, when I'm awake and open and accessing my own principle, and I'm sensitive to that, then I can actually, through connection, begin to become awake and aware and access my partner's center. So I can actually kind of reach that. So those are the relational principles. And this is just kind of off the top of my head. And the last one, not the last, this is not a list here, but the other one that I would say is the principle of Aikido is this kind of this takemusu aiki, that conflict at its core has the seed of resolution, has the seed of healing, has the seed of moving towards healing and resolving in a positive some way. So maybe it's better to say a positive some principle, where, you know, I say this all the time, where, you know, two perspectives try to occupy the same place at the same time and they can't. That's a conflict, and there's tension there. And inside of that tension is stillness. And out of that stillness is coming energy. And the direction of that energy is the direction of Aikido. So coming into contact, that would be some contacting the principle.
What's intriguing is that we come into contact with something universal, but each one of us has different interpretations on what that looks like or sounds like, and how we identify it and how we access it. And so I think the joy of collaboration is also being able to appreciate the different interpretations and the different takes on these universal principles. For me, one of the most fundamental universal principles is the realization that we are facing fundamentally the unknown when it comes to uke, and when it comes to meeting the energy that we're receiving. The more we can actually stand in that space and recognize that we are facing an emerging event, not something that's programmed, or it's not a repetitive event, or it's not me attempting to make the moment look like the past, but more that I'm available to the actual emergence of the event, gives me a different relationship to what I'm facing. And that in itself opens up a lot of access to these living principles that I find exist in the art. So I think the question is really good, but it's also tremendously challenging to kind of put words onto these different unifying principles that are in a way alive. They're concrete ones that Bruno mentioned, and the word I would use would be center line, and the fundamental nature of how that operates. And then there are the ones that are based on the perspective of how we relate to the moment. And so there's a tremendous amount to open up and to explore. And I think there's a challenge in articulating that. So thank you, Cliff, for asking that question.
Great. So Don is with us from Florida. Hey, Don, how's it going?
Doing great. I almost had to lower my hand because you kind of answered the question I was going to ask. But I'll kind of just bring it up anyway. We do this kind of retreat, and this year's theme was actually about principles, and maybe more importantly, what they are and how you might teach them in the process of the Kihon. And we really struggled with the languaging of what is a principle, you know, and so we were trying to come up with things like kazushi, you know, you know, like Bruno was talking about, these cycles that happen in nature. Oji, you were saying, Miles, you know, or Patrick rather, you know, this is such an important thing. And then we were thinking, and it really struggled with this. It took us hours. We were talking about this sort of thing. And then we were thinking about, is Aiki a principle? And you were kind of touching on that. Maybe Takamasu Aiki is a principle, but is Aiki just by itself a principle would be interesting. And then how do you bring that kind of principle-based approach when you're traveling and maybe your partner is not responding in maybe the same way that you're used to or something? And how do you not fall into the trap of just going back to a stylistic approach of that? So there's really kind of two pieces there that are a little different, but any of that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, Bruno.
I didn't really need a partner who react like I want, because I always propose some situation quite, first of all, quite basic. And I'm able to move even if the partner is not moving, or so I don't need to have a particular uke style, things like that. But once again, yes, I think it's also the practice is a question of awareness. And for me, for example, it's important. I mean, 50% of the time you are okay, 50% of the time you are dirty. So I think when I'm traveling, most of the time people focus on the dirty aspect and a little bit less on the okay. So it's true that I give some quite a lot of importance to okay work, okay study, okay awareness, but finally, I don't need that they react in a way or another way. It doesn't matter. It depends after the level of the communication we have. But in a basic communication, no, they can react like they want. I have enough the same pleasure with a beginner than with an advanced guy. After, for the art, the quality of the relationship with the partner, of course, we need to have some. It's like when you play a tennis match. If the guy don't give you the ball back, the game stops. And if you want to progress, you need to have someone who give you the ball in certain way, and so it's like that. But at the end, I don't need to have a particular okay.
There was I just add one thing. It's interesting to consider what it would be like to practice Aikido where uke is never wrong. And because it's so oftentimes in our community, when the technique doesn't go well, you can hear it. Well, uke didn't do the right attack. But what would it be like to enter into it in such a way where uke was not wrong? You'd have to rely strictly on principle, because any relationship to relying on technique would bog you down in uke needing to be the appropriate uke for each technique.
But it can improve his awareness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.